Get out." The town elder slapped the dismissal letter against Evelyn Harper's chest so hard she stumbled backward into the street. "You're done here." She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She picked up the letter, folded it once, and tucked it inside her coat right against her heart like a scar she intended to keep. If you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do, stay with me. Subscribe to our channel, follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The letter was only 11 words long. "Your services are no longer required. Leave Red Hollow by sundown." Evelyn Harper had read it 4 times already, standing in the middle of the main street of Red Hollow, Montana territory, with the summer dust rising around her boots, and every person she had ever helped refusing to meet her eyes. 11 words, after 7 years. She had come to Red Hollow at 20 years old, with nothing but a teaching certificate, a worn leather suitcase, and the stubborn belief that education could change a community. She had built the schoolhouse herself, not metaphorically, not almost. She had driven nails and carried lumber alongside the men because there was no money to hire extra hands, and the children needed a roof over their heads before winter arrived. She had taught reading to farmers' wives who were too proud to admit they'd never learned. She had opened the schoolroom on Saturday mornings for the ranch hands' sons who couldn't come during the week because their fathers needed them in the fields. She had stayed late every evening grading papers by candlelight, writing encouraging notes in the margins of compositions written by children who had never once been told that their words had value. 7 years. And 11 words ended all of it. Evelyn. She turned at the sound of her name. It was Martha Gaines, whose daughter Clara had been Evelyn's best student for 3 consecutive years. Martha was standing at the edge of the boardwalk, with her hands folded in front of her apron, and she was not looking at Evelyn's face. She was looking somewhere past her shoulder at the middle distance where nothing important was happening. "Martha." Evelyn kept her voice steady. "Did you need something?" Martha's jaw tightened. I wanted to say the town council made their decision, and I think it's better if you just—" "Did you read the report?" Evelyn asked. "The one that Gerald Holt submitted to the council. Did you read it yourself, or did someone just tell you what it said?" Martha's eyes finally cut to hers. Just for a second, then away again. "It doesn't matter what I read," Martha said quietly. "It matters what people believe." "It matters what's true," Evelyn said. Martha shook her head slowly, and there was something in that small gesture, that tired, resigned little movement, that hurt worse than the letter had. Because Martha Gaines wasn't a cruel woman. She wasn't stupid or vindictive. She was just afraid. Afraid of Gerald Holt, who owned the general store and the mill and the only bank within 40 miles. Afraid of his money, his connections, his ability to make a person's life in Red Hollow very comfortable or very difficult, depending entirely on which side of him they stood on. "I'm sorry," Martha whispered. "I know you are," Evelyn said. And she did know it. That was perhaps the hardest thing of all. "Tell Clara she was the finest writer I ever taught. I mean that." She turned and walked back toward the boarding house. She did not run. Inside her small room on the 2nd floor, Evelyn moved with the careful efficiency of someone who had learned long ago not to waste energy on things she couldn't change. She had 2 hours. Sundown was still 4 hours away, but she did not intend to give this town the satisfaction of watching her wait until the last possible minute, as though she were hoping someone would come to change their minds. No one was coming. She had understood that the moment she'd seen the council chamber empty out this morning, all 6 men filing past her in the hallway, without a single one stopping to explain, justify, or apologize. 6 men, all of whom she knew by name, whose children she had taught, or whose wives she had helped, or whose families she had quietly assisted during hard winters when the money ran short. None of them stopped. Gerald Holt had seen to that. She folded her dresses carefully. She only had 3, and placed them in the suitcase alongside her teaching materials, her lesson books, her small collection of novels that she'd carried from town to town since she was 17. She tucked her savings into the inner pocket of her traveling coat. It wasn't much. Teachers in frontier towns were never paid much, but it was enough to get somewhere if she was careful. The question was, where? She sat down on the edge of the narrow bed and pressed her palms flat against her knees to stop the trembling that had started sometime around the third reading of the letter and hadn't stopped since. Not from fear. She recognized this trembling. It was anger that had nowhere to go. She was furious. Not at the town council who were small men making small decisions. Not even at the families who had looked away from her this morning. She was furious at herself for being surprised. She had watched Gerald Holt operate in this town for 3 years. She had seen the way he moved his money like chess pieces, the way he smiled at men he intended to ruin, the way he bought loyalty, the same way other people bought grain in bulk at discount, with no particular concern for quality. She had watched him do this to other people. She just hadn't believed he would come for her. She had thought foolishly, arrogantly, stupidly that her work would protect her, that 7 years of genuine service would create some kind of immunity, that if she just kept doing good, kept her head down, kept teaching the children and helping the community, the Gerald Holts of the world would have no reason to bother with her. She had been wrong. Gerald Holt had a very specific reason to bother with her. 3 months ago, she had found a discrepancy. It wasn't intentional. She had been helping the Larson family organize their land deed records, a favor for a widow who couldn't afford a lawyer, when she noticed something that didn't fit. A survey notation. A date that was wrong. A measurement that, if correct, would mean that Gerald Holt's recently purchased mill property extended 40 yards further than the original deed described. 40 yards that included the northern corner of the Larson family's homestead land. She had shown it to Margaret Larson quietly, carefully, without making accusations she couldn't prove. She had told the widow to take the documents to the Territorial Land Office in Billings and let someone with proper authority examine them. She didn't know that Margaret Larson, terrified and grateful and unsure what to do, had mentioned Evelyn's name to her brother-in-law, and that the brother-in-law had mentioned it to someone at the mill, and that someone at the mill had mentioned it to Gerald Holt, and that Gerald Holt, within 72 hours, had begun the quiet and systematic destruction of Evelyn Harper's reputation in Red Hollow. It had taken him less than 3 months. He hadn't even needed to lie dramatically. He had simply whispered, suggested, wondered aloud in the company of men whose opinion mattered whether Evelyn Harper was perhaps a bit too interested in other people's private business. Whether a woman with no family and no husband who spent her evenings going through other people's records might not be entirely trustworthy. Whether the Kendall boy's injury last spring, the one where he'd fallen from the schoolroom steps, might have involved some negligence on the teacher's part. That last one had done the most damage. Tommy Kendall had broken his arm falling down the schoolroom steps in April. It was an accident. Tommy himself had said so, had cried it in fact through his tears, insisting that Miss Harper hadn't even been nearby, that he'd just slipped on the wet wood. His parents had never blamed her. The doctor had called it an ordinary childhood mishap, but Gerald Holt had taken that accident and turned it slowly, almost imperceptibly, into a question. And once a question existed in a small community's mind about whether a teacher was careless with children's safety, it didn't need to be answered. It just needed to exist. By the time the town council called their meeting, Evelyn had already been tried and convicted in the court of communal unease. The formal letter was just paperwork. She stood up, closed the suitcase, and put on her coat. Her horse, a 10-year-old gray named Grayson, was stabled at the edge of town. He wasn't a fast horse or a young horse, but he was steady and he was hers, and she trusted him more than she trusted any person in Red Hollow at this particular moment. She carried her suitcase downstairs without asking for help. The landlady, Mrs. Pruitt, was waiting in the front hallway. She was a small woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and flour on her hands, and she had been Evelyn's landlady for 4 years. When Evelyn reached the bottom of the stairs, Mrs. Pruitt pressed something into her hand without speaking. Evelyn looked down. It was $3. For the road, Mrs. Pruitt said in a voice barely above a whisper. It's not much. It's all I can... She stopped. Her eyes were wet. I know you didn't do anything wrong, Evelyn. I want you to know I know that. Why didn't you say it? Evelyn asked. Not with cruelty, just with honest curiosity. Why didn't you say it to the council? Mrs. Pruitt looked down at the floor. I have a business. I have Gerald Holt holds the note on this building. If I understand, Evelyn said, and she did. She took the $3 and put them in her pocket and picked up her suitcase and walked out the front door of the boarding house for the last time. She did not look back. The trail out of Red Hollow ran northwest through open grassland before climbing into the foothills of the Little Belt Mountains. Evelyn knew it reasonably well. She had ridden it occasionally on Sunday afternoons when she needed to clear her head, but she had never traveled it alone and never with the intention of not returning. The afternoon was bright and viciously hot, the kind of Montana summer heat that sat on your shoulders like a physical weight. Grayson moved steadily beneath her, his ears flicking forward and back, picking up on her mood with the sensitivity that good horses have for human distress. "I know," she said to him. "I know, just keep moving." She had no specific destination. That was the truth she had been carefully not thinking about since she'd read the letter. There was a small settlement called Copper Falls, about 30 miles northeast, where she had a professional acquaintance, a Mrs. Halverson, who ran the church school and had once expressed interest in having a second teacher. But Evelyn didn't know if that offer still stood. Didn't know if news from Red Hollow would travel faster than she did, didn't know if Gerald Holt's reach extended that far. There was Helena, the territorial capital further northwest. There were other towns. There was technically the rest of the American frontier stretching in every direction with unlimited theoretical possibility and very little practical certainty. She was 27 years old. She had $12 and $3 more that she'd just received. She had a horse, a suitcase, 3 dresses, and an education that a town had just declared worthless. She had herself. She focused on that last thing. Just that. You have yourself, Evelyn. You have always had yourself. That has always been enough. She was still repeating that quiet internal instruction when Grayson stumbled. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't fall. He caught himself, broke his stride, took 2 uneven steps. But she felt the wrongness in his gait, and she pulled him to a gentle halt and climbed down to check his legs. His front right fetlock was hot to the touch and slightly swollen. Not seriously, not broken, not acutely injured, but enough. He'd been favoring it slightly for the last few days, and she'd noticed, but hadn't wanted to believe it, hadn't wanted to add one more problem to the list. Now the heat and the uneven trail had aggravated whatever had been brewing, and he was telling her in the only language he had that he couldn't carry her further today. She looked at the sky. The sun was tilting west, still 2 hours above the horizon, but the air had that quality, that particular stillness that meant weather was building somewhere to the south. She had grown up in Missouri, and she had lived in Montana for 7 years, and she knew what that stillness meant. She was on a mountain trail 10 miles from the nearest settlement with a lame horse and a storm coming, and nowhere particular to be. She pressed her forehead against Grayson's neck for a moment. Just a moment. "All right," she said quietly. "All right, we figure this out." She led him off the trail to a small flat area where a few scrubby pines offered some wind cover, tied him loosely to a branch so he could graze, and opened her suitcase to assess her supplies. She had a blanket. She had some dried jerky and hardtack that she'd packed almost as an afterthought, more from habit than from planning. She had matches. She had her lesson books, which were useless for survival, but which she found oddly comforting simply to touch. She was arranging these things with the methodical calm of a woman who refused to panic when she heard the sound of hooves on the trail. She went still, single rider, moving at an easy pace, not in a hurry, coming from the direction of Red Hollow. Her first thought was immediate and cold. Gerald Holt sent someone after me. Her second thought, half a second later, was more practical. You don't know that. Don't react to what you don't know. She stood up and positioned herself beside Grayson, one hand resting on his neck, her chin level. Whatever was coming down that trail, she was going to meet it on her feet. The rider came around the curve in the trail and saw her before she fully saw him. He pulled up immediately, which a person with bad intentions rarely did, and she had a moment to observe him before he spoke. Tall man, broad-shouldered, on a dark bay horse that was considerably better bred than Grayson. Worn working clothes. A hat pulled low against the afternoon sun. The kind of face that had spent a great deal of time outdoors and had the weathering to show for it. I wasn't anyone she recognized from Red Hollow. That alone was something. Ma'am. His voice was even. Not apologetic, not aggressive, not overly friendly. Just even. Horse trouble. Nothing I can't manage, she said. He glanced at Grayson's right foreleg, which was now visibly cocked, the horse resting it to take weight off, and then back at her. He didn't argue with her statement, but his expression suggested he had noticed the same thing she had. Nathan Cole, he said. I run a ranch about 4 miles further up through the valley there. He tilted his head slightly northwest. You're welcome to stop in for the night if you need somewhere to rest the horse. We've got a proper stable and a woman who cooks supper at 6. I don't know you, Evelyn said. That's true, he agreed. I have no particular reason to trust your offer. Also true, he said. He didn't seem offended. He seemed, if anything, slightly amused, though it was the kind of amusement that stayed well behind the eyes and never quite reached the mouth. I can't fix that. I can only tell you that a lame horse in the foothills with a storm coming is a more immediate problem than whether you trust me. Evelyn looked at Grayson's leg. She looked at the sky. She looked at the rider who called himself Nathan Cole, and who sat his horse with the relaxed, particular stillness of a man who was accustomed to waiting for people to make decisions. You'll need to ride ahead where I can see you, she said. And I'll be coming into that stable myself to see that my horse is properly settled before I accept any supper or any bed. Wouldn't have it any other way, Nathan Cole said. The ranch appeared through the last of the pines as the sky to the south began to go the deep purple gray of incoming weather, and Evelyn's first impression was that it was considerably more substantial than the word ranch had suggested. Not grand, not wealthy, not showy, but solid. Built to last. The kind of place where every structure existed because it was needed and had been constructed by people who intended to be there a long time. A man who went by Hector came out of the barn to take the horses. He was a compact, capable-looking man of about 50 with a dark mustache and an easy manner, and he spoke to Grayson in a low, calming murmur while he examined the swollen fetlock with expert hands. Soft tissue strain, he said to Evelyn. Nothing broken. Cold water wrap tonight, 2 days rest, he'll be right. Thank you, she said. Good horse, Hector said, which she understood was his highest form of endorsement. She stayed until she had watched Hector settle Grayson into a clean stall with fresh water and good hay. Then she walked back out of the stable and found Nathan Cole waiting near the main house door with the particular patience of a man who had decided not to rush her and intended to stick to that decision. The woman who cooks, Evelyn said. Is she family? Rosa, Nathan said. She and Hector have been with this ranch 12 years. They're not family by blood. They're the kind of family you choose. Evelyn considered that. All right, she said. I'll accept the supper. Rosa was a broad-shouldered woman in her late 40s who moved around the kitchen with total authority and gave Evelyn exactly 3 seconds of assessment before apparently reaching a decision about her. Sit, she said in a tone that managed to be both entirely without warmth and entirely without hostility, which Evelyn found oddly refreshing after a day of being either aggressively rejected or cautiously pitied. Stew's almost done. There's bread from this morning. Thank you, Evelyn said. You're from Red Hollow, Rosa said. It wasn't a question. Evelyn looked at her. You know it? I know the road, Rosa said. Everybody coming from that direction in the last 10 years has come from Red Hollow or through it. She set a bowl of stew on the table with the decisiveness of a woman who didn't particularly care about its dramatic impact. I also heard Gerald Holt's been stirring trouble again. The name spoken plainly in this kitchen by a woman she'd met 10 minutes ago hit Evelyn somewhere between her ribs. Word travels fast, she said carefully. This is Montana, Rosa said, and sat down across from her with her own bowl. Everything travels fast except the snow. Eat. Evelyn ate. For several minutes, neither of them spoke, and it was the first truly comfortable silence Evelyn had experienced all day, the silence of a person who wasn't pretending she didn't exist, and wasn't pitying her, and wasn't silently calculating the cost of being seen with her. He ran off the Miller family in 1882, Rosa said finally. Good people, had a homestead claim on the East Ridge that he wanted for expansion. He found a way to question their title, spread some talk about the husband, and they were gone in 6 weeks. She looked at Evelyn steadily. That's what he does. He finds the people who are worth something, and he figures out what they might know or see that could get in his way, and then he gets rid of them. You seem very certain of this, Evelyn said. I've been watching him for 12 years, Rosa said, and I've been watching what he does to people for just as long. Why doesn't anyone stop him? Rosa gave her a look that was not unkind, but was very direct. Because stopping him means having something he needs or wants more than he needs, and wants to be rid of you. Most people don't have that. She picked up her bread. Yet. That word yet landed quietly and stayed there. Takang. Nathan Cole came in from outside. When supper was nearly finished, poured himself a cup of coffee, and sat at the far end of the table, and for the first 10 minutes said almost nothing. He asked how Grayson was settling. He mentioned that the storm had shifted east and would probably miss them. He told Rosa the bread was good. It was Evelyn who finally addressed what was sitting in the room. Mr. Cole, she said, I appreciate the hospitality. I want to be clear that I have no intention of placing anyone else in a difficult position because of my own situation. I'll leave in the morning when my horse is rested enough. Nathan put down his coffee cup. Where will you go? He asked. That isn't your concern. You're right, it isn't, he said. But it's a reasonable question. I'll find another town, another school. There are positions. Gerald Holt has friends in Copper Falls, Nathan said. He has a business contact in Helena who owes him a favor. He has a cousin who sits on the school board in Missoula. Evelyn went very still. How do you know those things? She asked. Because he's tried to buy this land for 6 years, Nathan said, and a man who wants to take something from you is worth knowing thoroughly. He looked at her steadily. I'm not telling you this to frighten you. I'm telling you because you deserve to know what you're riding into if you leave in the morning without a plan. Evelyn's hands were very still in her lap. What are you suggesting? She asked. I'm not suggesting anything, Nathan said. I'm not in the habit of telling people what to do with their lives. I'm just putting information on the table and letting you do what you want with it. You need a school teacher, Evelyn said slowly. Nathan blinked. I haven't said, the Hector children, Evelyn said. The 2 older ones I saw when we came in, and Hector mentioned a 3rd younger. And I'd wager there are ranch hand families with children who aren't close enough to town to attend the Red Hollow School, even when a school is operating. The corner of Nathan's mouth moved, just slightly. There are 7 children on or near this ranch who haven't had regular schooling in 2 years. And you need someone who can manage your records, Evelyn said. I noticed the filing system in the front room when Rosa brought me through. It's a good system, but it hasn't been maintained consistently. There are at least 3 years of land filings that need cross-referencing with the territorial records. Nathan was quiet for a moment. You noticed all that in the 2 minutes Rosa walked you through the front room, he said. I notice things, Evelyn said. It's what got me into trouble in the first place. Another silence. Then Rosa, who had been pretending to clean the stove and doing a very poor job of pretending she wasn't listening, said without turning around, She should stay. Rosa, Nathan said. I'm just saying what's true, Rosa said. You've been needing someone who can teach those kids for 2 years. You've been needing someone who can manage those records since old Whitmore left, and she's clearly competent. A pause. Also, Gerald Holt made her leave her home. I have personal feelings about that. Evelyn looked at Nathan Cole across the table. I'm not looking for charity, she said. If I stay, I work. I teach the children properly, I manage the records properly. I earn my place here the same as anyone else. That's what I would expect, Nathan said. And if Gerald Holt's name comes up in those records, then we deal with that when it comes up, Nathan said. His voice was very even. I'm not going to pretend I don't know what you found in Margaret Larson's deed records. I heard about it. His jaw tightened briefly. I've suspected for some time that his land holdings have some irregularities. If there's documentation, I'd want to know about it. Evelyn sat with that for a moment. Mr. Cole, she said, the last time I trusted a community, it cost me everything. I know, he said. I'm not asking you to trust a community. I'm asking you to make a practical decision about where to spend the next 2 days while your horse recovers." The corner of his mouth moved again, that small contained movement that she was beginning to understand was his version of a smile. "Everything else can wait." Outside, the first low rumble of the storm reached them. Not the storm that had shifted east, but a second one closer, rolling down from the mountains with the particular authority of Montana weather that had not received the memo about shifting east. Evelyn Harper looked at the table. She looked at Rosa's back. She looked at Nathan Cole's steady, unhurried face. She had $12 and a lame horse, and a man she didn't know offering her 2 days. She was beginning to realize the first genuine information she'd had in 3 months about exactly what Gerald Holt was capable of and what he was afraid of. "I'll stay 2 days," she said. Nathan nodded and picked up his coffee. "Good," he said, as though it were that simple, as though some things against all evidence still were. That night, in the small spare room, Rosa had prepared with the brisk efficiency of a woman who kept a house ready for unexpected needs. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed and unfolded the letter from the town council. She read it once more. "Your services are no longer required. Leave Red Hollow by sundown." 11 words. She folded it again. But this time, instead of placing it against her heart, she set it on the bedside table. She was done carrying it like a wound. She was going to carry it like evidence. Because somewhere in the records of this ranch, in those 3 years of unfiled land documents, in the survey notations and territorial filings and deed cross-references that had been sitting untouched since old Whitmore had left, she was almost certain she was going to find something. Gerald Holt was afraid of her. And people did not become afraid of you unless you already had the power to hurt them. She just hadn't understood what that power was yet. She laid down on the narrow bed, pulled the blanket up, and listened to the storm arrive, the real storm. The one that hadn't shifted east at all as it came down over the mountains and broke open against the roof of Nathan Cole's ranch house with a sound like the world making a decision. She closed her eyes. "You have yourself, Evelyn. That has always been enough. And now you have something more." The storm that had broken over the ranch the night before left everything smelling like wet pine and cold earth. And Evelyn was already awake before Rosa knocked on the door at 5:30. She had slept badly, not from fear and not from grief, but from the particular restlessness of a mind that had found a problem worth solving and refused to stop turning it over. Gerald Holt's name had become a kind of engine inside her skull, running quietly and continuously through the dark hours, driving her back through everything she had seen and heard and noticed in her 7 years in Red Hollow. She dressed quickly and was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of Rosa's strong black coffee before anyone else in the house was moving. Rosa came in 10 minutes later, took one look at her, and said nothing. She simply started the breakfast fire and put a second pot of water on, and the two of them existed in the same kitchen, in a silence that was again remarkably comfortable. It was Evelyn who finally spoke. "Rosa, those land filing documents in the front room, who maintained them before Whitmore left?" Rosa cracked 4 eggs into a pan without looking up. "Nathan did. Then he hired Whitmore to take it over so he could focus on the cattle work. Whitmore was thorough, but he was also old and tired, and when he went back to Ohio to live near his daughter Nathan, just let it go." She paused. "He doesn't like paperwork. He's a man who prefers things he can see and touch and fix with his hands. How long has Holt been pressuring him for the land?" 6 years formally. Before that, it was just talk and offers and friendly suggestions that Nathan sell while the price was good. Rosa put a plate in front of Evelyn with the same decisive authority she applied to everything. Nathan told him no in 1879, told him no again in 1881. By 1883, Holt stopped asking and started other things. What kind of other things? Rosa's jaw tightened. He filed a counter-survey claim on the north pasture, said Nathan's boundary markers were wrong by 200 yards. It cost Nathan 6 months and $300 in legal fees to prove the original survey was correct. A pause. Then one of Nathan's water access points got disputed. Then there was a question about the grazing rights on the federal land at the upper ridge. Evelyn put down her coffee cup. "He's been systematically harassing this ranch for 3 years. "Yes," Rosa said. And Nathan hasn't done anything about it. Nathan fights the individual battles, Rosa said carefully. He's won every one of them so far. But he fights them the way you fight a fire, one outbreak at a time. He doesn't... She stopped, turned from the stove to look at Evelyn directly. He doesn't think strategically. He thinks in seasons, in cattle cycles, in weather patterns. He knows how to survive. He doesn't always know how to dismantle something. Evelyn sat with that word. Dismantle. I need access to those records, she said. All of them, the filed ones and the unfiled ones. Rosa turned back to the stove. That's Nathan's decision. I know, Evelyn said. I'll ask him. He won't say no, Rosa said, in a tone that suggested this was information and not prediction. He just won't say yes easily. He'll want to understand why. Then I'll explain why, Evelyn said. She heard Rosa's version of approval in the silence that followed, a particular quality of quietness that meant the woman had heard something she considered sensible and was choosing not to argue with it. That was enough. Nathan came in from the early morning ranch check just after 6, and the moment he pulled off his hat and saw Evelyn sitting at the table with an expression he probably hadn't expected, focused, not distressed, not grateful but working. He stopped in the doorway for just a moment. You're up early, he said. I need to talk to you about your records, Evelyn said. He came in, poured his coffee, sat down across from her. He didn't ask her to wait or tell her it could be handled later. That was one of the first things she noticed about Nathan Cole. He paid attention when someone spoke to him. Not performing attention, not politely pretending to listen while his mind was somewhere else. Actual, steady, complete attention. What about them? He said. I need to go through all of them, she said. Not just to organize and file them properly, though that also needs doing. I need to look at every land survey, every deed record, every boundary filing and water rights notation you have from the last 10 years. Why? Because Gerald Holt has been attacking this ranch through legal and administrative channels for 3 years, she said. And I think the reason he's persistent about this specific piece of land isn't just that he wants more range. I think there's something on this land or something about this land's position that he specifically needs. And if I'm right about that, then what he did to me in Red Hollow and what he's been doing to you out here are connected. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Outside, she could hear Hector giving instructions to one of the younger ranch hands in rapid Spanish, and somewhere further away, one of the children was calling for something with the tireless, high-pitched urgency that only children under 8 were capable of sustaining. What did you find in Margaret Larson's records? Nathan asked. A survey discrepancy. His mill property's boundary notation used a reference marker that was 40 yards further north than the original township plat showed. It was subtle, the kind of thing you'd only catch if you were comparing the two documents directly. 40 yards, Nathan said. 40 yards that included the corner of her homestead claim. Did she file anything with the territorial office? I told her to. I don't know if she did before. Evelyn stopped, breathed, before he made sure I was no longer in a position to help her. Nathan set down his coffee cup. If he's willing to run a school teacher out of her home to protect a 40-yard boundary discrepancy, he said slowly, then it's not about 40 yards. No, Evelyn said. It's not. Something shifted in Nathan Cole's face. It wasn't dramatic. It was the particular subtle shift of a man who had been fighting individual fires for 3 years and had just been handed a map showing him where they were all coming from. The record boxes are in the front room, he said. 3 trunks along the east wall and 2 filing shelves. Whitmore's organized material goes up to late 1882. Everything after that is in whatever order it arrived. I know, Evelyn said. I saw it last night. A pause. You were looking at the record system at 11 o'clock at night, Nathan said. I couldn't sleep. Something moved behind his eyes that might in a different man have been the beginning of a smile. Take whatever you need, he said. Ask Rosa if you need anything. Ask me if it's about the land or the cattle. What's the boundary situation on your north pasture? She asked immediately. Settled. 3 years ago. The original survey holds. I'll need the settlement documents. They're in the left trunk. Green folder if Whitmore labeled it correctly. And the water rights dispute. Ongoing. Still with the Territorial Commissioner's office in Helena. His jaw tightened slightly. They've had it for 14 months. 14 months, Evelyn repeated. And you haven't followed up. I follow up every 2 months, he said. And now there was something in his voice that wasn't quite frustration, but was adjacent to it. The controlled irritation of a man who had been patient far longer than patience felt natural. Every 2 months they tell me it's under review. Evelyn sat very still for a moment. Mr. Cole, who submitted the counterclaim on your water rights? Holt's attorney, man named Pressfield out of Helena. And who is the Territorial Commissioner currently overseeing your case? Nathan's expression changed. A man named Alderson, he said slowly. He was appointed He stopped. About 18 months ago. Right around the time Holt filed the water rights counterclaim, Evelyn said. The kitchen had gone very quiet. Rosa was still at the stove, but she had stopped moving. That might be a coincidence, Nathan said, but his voice had gone flat in a way that indicated he didn't believe it was. It might be, Evelyn agreed. That's why I need to see the records. She spent the entire morning in the front room with the trunks open around her, and she worked the way she had always worked, systematically without rushing. Building a picture document by document, the way you built a structure board by board. First you understood what you had. Then you understood what was missing. Then you understood what the gaps meant. By mid-morning she had established a baseline. Nathan Cole's original land claim was solid. The patent deed from 1874 was properly recorded, properly described, properly witnessed. His boundary survey from that same year was conducted by a federal surveyor named Hendricks, whose notations were precise, and whose reference markers she could cross-check against the township plat maps that Whitmore had thankfully kept filed in chronological order. The ranch was his. Legitimately, completely, unambiguously his. What she found next made her sit back in her chair and press both hands flat against the table. The North Pasture counter-survey that Holt had filed in 1883, the one that Nathan had successfully contested, used a reference marker called Station Point 7. It was the same reference marker. The exact same notation, the exact same number as the one in Margaret Larson's deed discrepancy. Station Point 7. In the Larson document, Station Point 7 had been placed 40 yards north of its actual location. In Nathan's counter-survey, Station Point 7 had been placed 60 yards east of its actual location. She pulled out the township plat map and put the two survey documents beside it and looked at the three things together. She understood what she was looking at. She had to look at it for another full minute before she let herself believe she was right. Then she stood up, went to the kitchen doorway and said, "Nathan." He was at the table reviewing cattle tallies with Hector. Both men looked up. "I need you to come look at something," she said. Her voice was steady. She had made a deliberate choice to keep it steady. Because what she had just found was not a 40-yard discrepancy, or a 60-yard shift, or a disputed water access point. What she had just found was a pattern. Nathan stood over the table where she had arranged the documents and the plat map, and she walked him through it methodically. The original survey. The counter-survey. The Larson deed. Station Point 7 in all three documents in three different wrong locations. "Here," she said, pointing to the plat map. "The real Station Point 7 is here on this ridge. That's where the federal survey put it in 1872. But in Holt's counter-survey of your North Pasture, it appears here 60 yards east. And in the Larson deed that he recorded in 1882, it appears here 40 yards north." Nathan was leaning over the documents with his hands braced on the table and his face very close to the maps. He was quiet for a long time. "He's moving it," he said. "He's moving it selectively," Evelyn said. "Not on every document. Only on the documents that affect the properties he wants to acquire or control. He's using a fraudulent reference marker to shift boundaries in whatever direction he needs them to go." "But he lost the North Pasture counterclaim," Nathan said. "I beat that in court." "Because you had your original survey, and you had a lawyer who caught the discrepancy," Evelyn said. "But not everyone who gets a deed recorded with a wrong Station Point 7 is going to have those resources. Most people are going to look at an official-looking document filed with the county And they're going to believe it. Nathan straightened up slowly. How many properties? He said. I don't know yet. I only have your records and what I saw in the Larson documents. But if he's been doing this consistently since 1882... 3 years, Nathan said. 3 years, Evelyn confirmed. With access to the county recording office and with a territorial commissioner who was appointed right around the time this started. Alderson, Nathan said. Yes. The silence between them had a particular weight to it. The kind of weight that meant they were both looking at the same thing and understanding its full dimensions for the first time. He ran you out of Red Hollow, Nathan said, because you found the Larson document. Yes. And he's been trying to get this land for 6 years because this land sits here, Evelyn said, and pointed to the plat map. Right here, between the Larson homestead, the Miller homestead, the family Rosa mentioned, who left in 1882, and the proposed route of the northern spur of the Great Northern Railway. Nathan went completely still. The rail survey, he said. I heard there was a preliminary survey, a year ago. The railway needs water access along the northern route, Evelyn said. Your ridge controls the primary creek feeding the North Pasture Valley. Whoever owns this land properly documented with clear title and water rights would have significant negotiating power with the railway. She watched Nathan Cole absorb that. She watched him take it in the way a man takes in something that reframes 3 years of confusion into sudden, terrible clarity. He's not building a business empire, Nathan said quietly. He's positioning for the railroad. He needs clear title to a corridor of land before the railway announces the northern route officially, Evelyn said. Once the announcement comes, the prices go up and the legal scrutiny goes up with them. Right now, while it's still preliminary, he can move documents and shift boundaries and push people off their claims quietly. By the time anyone looks closely, the land will all be his, Nathan said. Legally documented as his, Evelyn said. With fraudulent surveys that are already filed, already official-looking, already part of the record. Nathan picked up the Larson deed copy and looked at it for a long moment. Margaret Larson, he said. Does she still have her claim? I don't know. If she went to the territorial office like I told her. And if she didn't, Evelyn pressed her lips together. Then she may have already accepted a buyout she didn't know she'd been cheated into. Nathan set the document down. I need to send a rider to Copper Falls, he said. Someone needs to check on Margaret Larson today. I agree. And someone needs to contact the federal land office in Billings. Not the territorial commissioner's office, the federal office directly. What Holt is doing is not just a territorial matter. Manipulating federal survey markers is a federal crime. How do you know that? Because I spent 7 years in a frontier town helping people understand their land rights, Evelyn said. And I made it my business to know what protections existed and who had the authority to enforce them. Nathan Cole looked at her for a moment with an expression she couldn't fully read. It wasn't surprise exactly, and it wasn't admiration in the way that felt condescending. It was more like recognition. Like a man who had been working alone on a problem for a long time and had just realized that the person across the table had been working on the same problem from a different direction. You're not just a school teacher, he said. I'm exactly a school teacher, Evelyn said. Teaching people what they need to know to protect themselves is precisely what a school teacher does. Something in Nathan's face shifted again, and this time it reached his mouth just barely. Just the faint beginning of something that in a different context might have become a real smile. I'll send Hector to Copper Falls, he said. I'll write the letter to the federal land office myself today. He paused. I'll need you to help me make sure the language is correct. I'll help you with the letter, Evelyn said. And the children, he said. Rosa's been after me for 2 years about the children. I'll start with them tomorrow morning, Evelyn said. If that still works. He nodded once. Then, in a voice that was quieter than anything he'd said so far, not softer exactly, but lower, carrying a different weight. Miss Harper, I want you to know that what he did running you out the way he did, that's not something I take lightly. A person who spends 7 years building something for a community and gets repaid that way. Mr. Cole, Evelyn said, and her voice came out more firmly than she intended. I appreciate that, I do, But I didn't come to this table looking for sympathy. I came because I have work to do, and this is where the work is. That's enough for me right now." He studied her for a moment. "All right," he said. "Just that." She turned back to the documents. Hector returned from Copper Falls the next afternoon. Evelyn was in the middle of the ranch hand's children's second reading lesson when she heard the horse come in faster than Hector normally rode, and something in the sound of it brought her out of her chair before she'd consciously decided to move. She told the children to practice their letters and went outside. Hector was off his horse before it had fully stopped, and his face had the tight, controlled look of a man carrying news he didn't want to carry. "Margaret Larson," he said. "Tell me," Evelyn said. "She accepted a buyout 6 weeks ago," he said. $500 for the full homestead claim. She's living with her sister in Billings now." Evelyn felt that land somewhere behind her sternum. "The deed transfer," she said. "Is it recorded?" "Filed with the county 3 weeks ago," Hector said. "Proper, legal, signed and witnessed." "Was the sale price fair for the land?" Hector's expression answered before his words did. "Going rate for that parcel without the boundary dispute closer to 2,000. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "He paid her less than a quarter of what it was worth," she said, after his fraudulent survey made her believe her claim was compromised. "Yes," Hector said. "And now it's recorded." "Yes." She put her hand against the fence post beside her and breathed. Nathan had come out of the barn when he heard Hector arrive, and he had heard enough of the exchange. He stood a few feet away, hat in hand, and his jaw was set in the particular way it's set when he was managing something he felt strongly. "The Miller property?" Evelyn asked. "I asked around," Hector said. "Miller sold in 1882 for what people said was a fair price at the time. Now, with the railway talk, that land would be worth 4, maybe 5 times what they got." "So he already has the Miller land," Evelyn said. "And now the Larson land," Nathan said. "And he's been trying to get yours for 6 years," Evelyn said. She looked at Nathan. "Your water access is the last piece, with your North Creek access and the corridor from the Larson and Miller properties. He'd have the complete right-of-way," Nathan said. "Everything the railway would need." A long pause. "The letter to the federal office," Evelyn said. "Sent this morning," Nathan said, "with copies of the survey documents you identified." "That's not enough," she said. "Not by itself. A letter goes into a file. Files move slowly. Meanwhile, he's going to realize that Hector was asking questions in Copper Falls." Nathan's eyes moved to Hector's. "Who did you talk to?" he said. "Only the Halverson woman at the church," Hector said, "and old Remy at the feed store. But Remy talks." "So by tonight," Nathan said. "By tonight," Hector confirmed. Evelyn straightened. "Then we need to move faster than he does," she said. "We need someone in Billings talking directly to the federal land office in person, not a letter a person with the original documents in hand." "That's a 3-day ride," Nathan said. "I know. The person who goes needs to be able to explain what those documents mean and why they matter." "I know that too," Evelyn said. Nathan Cole looked at her. Evelyn Harper looked back. "I'll go," she said. "It's not safe," he said. "If Holt finds out—" "He's already made me leave one home," Evelyn said. "He is not going to make me stop." Her voice was absolutely level. "I need the original survey documents, the counter survey, and your water rights case file. I need a horse that can cover 40 miles a day. And I need a letter of authorization from you confirming that I'm carrying your documents with your consent." Evelyn. It was the first time he had used her first name. She noticed it, the way you noticed a change in weather, not dramatically, but with the immediate physical awareness that something had shifted. "You're not going alone," he said. "I'm not asking for an escort," she said. "I'm not offering one," he said. "I'm telling you I'm going with you because it's my land and my case and my signature on those documents, and because—" He stopped. Something moved across his face, brief and honest. "Because you came to this ranch with a lame horse and $12, and in 2 days you found what I couldn't find in 3 years of fighting this alone." Evelyn was quiet. "And because," he said more quietly, The last person who went up against Gerald Holt alone ended up on a mountain road in a storm with nowhere to go. That is not going to happen to you again. Not while I can do something about it. The words were not theatrical. He said them the way he said everything straight, and even with no decoration and no particular expectation of response. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. "We leave at dawn." "Dawn," she said. "I'll have the horses ready," he said. Rosa appeared in the kitchen doorway behind them, and when Evelyn turned, the older woman's expression held something that was not quite a smile. Something quieter and more considered. The expression of a woman who had been watching a particular situation develop and had just seen it arrive at exactly the point she'd expected. She said nothing. She went back inside. And Evelyn Harper stood in the cooling afternoon air, with Gerald Holt's fraud laid out in her mind like a map and a 3-day ride to Billings ahead of her, and felt for the first time since that letter had been pressed against her chest in the red hollow street, something that was not merely anger. Something that felt cautiously and dangerously like the beginning of hope. They rode out before the sun cleared the eastern ridge, with the document case strapped across Evelyn's saddlebag, and Nathan riding a half-length ahead on his dark bay. Not because he was leading, she understood, but because he was the kind of man who put himself between a threat and the people near him without thinking about it the way other men breathed. She didn't argue with it. She was picking her battles. The first hours of riding passed mostly in silence, the companionable kind that neither of them felt obligated to fill. Evelyn had learned in 2 days that Nathan Cole was not a man who spoke to hear himself speak, and she found that quality after 7 years of small-town life, where silence was treated as a social failure, something close to a relief. It was Nathan who broke it about 2 hours out, when they stopped to water the horses at a creek crossing. "Tell me about Red Hollow," he said. "Not the end of it, the beginning. Why you stayed 7 years." Evelyn looked at the water moving over the stones. "Because the children needed someone who would stay," she said. "Every teacher before me left inside 18 months. The conditions were hard, the pay was poor, the town was rough around the edges. I came for a 1-year appointment, and at the end of it, I thought 1 more year. And then another." She paused. "It's easy to stay somewhere when you believe you're needed." "And when did Holt start watching you?" "Longer ago than I realized," she said. "I found that out after, when I was helping families with their documents, the Larsons, the Coopers, the Brennan family. I must have been getting close to the pattern without knowing it. He would have noticed before I did." "He's careful," Nathan said. "He's patient," Evelyn corrected. "Those aren't always the same thing. A careful man avoids the risk. A patient man waits until the risk moves into a position where he can remove it cleanly." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "You think like someone who's been watching him too," he said. "I've been thinking about nothing else for 3 months," she said. "When you don't understand why something happened to you, you go back over it until you do. It took me 3 months of going over it to understand that I wasn't a mistake he made. I was a problem he solved." She said it flatly without self-pity, and Nathan received it the same way without flinching and without offering the kind of consolation that would have reduced it to something smaller than it was. "That won't be the last problem he tries to solve," Nathan said. "I know," Evelyn said. "That's why we need to get to Billings before he finds out we're going." Nathan swung back up onto his horse. "Then we stop talking and ride." They rode. They made 38 miles the first day and stopped at a way station just after dark, a rough but functional stopping point that served travelers on the Billings Road, run by a man named Garrett, who charged $1 a night for 2 cots and access to a wood stove, and didn't ask questions, which was exactly the quality Evelyn wanted in a way station proprietor at this particular moment. She sat by the wood stove after Garrett had retired with the document case open across her knees, going through the papers one more time. Not because she didn't know what they said. Because each time she read them, she caught something new, a notation, a date, a small anomaly that fit into the larger pattern, like a piece of a puzzle she was still assembling. Nathan came in from checking the horses and stopped when he saw her. "You should sleep," he said. "In a minute," she said. He sat down across from her. He didn't tell her again. He just watched her work for a moment with that same patient, attentive quality she had already started to recognize as simply the way he occupied a room. "Ask me what you're thinking," she said without looking up. "You found something else," he said. It wasn't a question. "The water rights case," she said. "The one with Commissioner Alderson that's been sitting for 14 months. There's a notation in your copy of the original filing, a receiving stamp. The date on the stamp and the date on the filing letter don't match." Nathan leaned forward slightly. "By how much?" 6 weeks. The letter is dated August 14th, 1884. The receiving stamp says September 28th. But your attorney's copy of the transmission record shows it was delivered August 19th, 5 days after I sent it. Which means it sat in someone's office for 5 weeks before it was officially stamped as received," Evelyn said. "That's not a filing delay. That's a deliberate hold." Nathan was very still. "Alderson held it," he said. "I can't prove that yet," Evelyn said carefully. "What I can show is the discrepancy. Whether Alderson held it personally or someone in his office did it at someone else's request, that's what the federal investigators would need to determine." "If there are federal investigators," Nathan said. "There will be," Evelyn said. "What Holt is doing crosses into federal territory 3 different ways. The survey markers are federal infrastructure. The water rights on federal grazing land are federal jurisdiction. And if the territorial commissioner's office is involved." She paused. "A territorial commissioner is a federally appointed position. Any corruption in that office is a federal matter." "You've been thinking about the legal architecture of this for a while," Nathan said. "Since the second hour of writing this morning," she said. He made a sound that was almost not quite but almost a laugh. "I'm beginning to understand why he wanted you out of Red Hollow." Evelyn looked up from the documents for the first time. "He made a mistake," she said. "When he pushed me out, he thought he was removing the threat. But he didn't destroy what I knew. He just gave me time and distance and motivation to put it together properly." Nathan was looking at her with that expression. She still hadn't fully cataloged the recognition that went too deep to be just professional respect and too steady to be anything as simple as admiration. "Get some sleep, Miss Harper," he said. "We've got 30 miles tomorrow, and I want to be in Billings before noon." She looked back down at the documents. "In a minute," she said again. This time he smiled. Actually smiled, not the contained, barely there expression she'd seen before, but a real one, brief and unguarded, before he pulled it back. "Good night, Evelyn," he said. She heard her name in his voice, and felt against her better judgment, against everything she'd decided about not noticing things that weren't relevant to the work. Something small and warm moved through her chest. She pressed it flat and went back to the documents. They reached Billings the following afternoon, and the Federal Land Office was a 2-story brick building on the main street that announced its institutional seriousness through the quality of its construction in a way that most government buildings in Montana Territory deliberately avoided. Evelyn walked in ahead of Nathan. The clerk at the front desk was a young man with spectacles and the harried expression of someone who fielded too many complaints from too many angry homesteaders to maintain enthusiasm for his work. "We need to speak with the supervising agent," Evelyn said. "We have evidence of systematic federal survey fraud affecting multiple land claims in the Red Hollow and Copper Falls area of the territory." The clerk blinked. "Do you have an appointment?" "We have original documents," Evelyn said, and placed the document case on his desk. "Including a fraudulently recorded federal survey marker used to shift at least 3 property boundaries, a 14-month hold on a water rights filing that we believe involved a territorial commissioner's office, and evidence of a coordinated scheme to acquire a railway right-of-way corridor through fraudulent title manipulation." The clerk stared at her. "The supervising agent," Evelyn said pleasantly. "Please." The supervising agent was a man named Caldwell, mid-50s, gray-haired, with the deliberate economical manner of someone who had spent 30 years sorting legitimate complaints from wishful thinking and had developed a finely calibrated instinct for the difference. He looked at Nathan's documents for 11 minutes without speaking. Then he looked up at Evelyn. "You identified this survey marker discrepancy yourself," he said. "Yes." "From the original township plat?" "Yes, the 1872 Federal Survey." Whitmore, Nathan's former records manager, had kept the original plat filed correctly, which gave me a clean baseline for comparison. And the notation connecting the discrepancy in the Cole counter-survey to the Larson deed. Same reference marker, station point 7, placed at 3 different false coordinates across 3 separate documents, always in whichever direction served Holt's boundary claim. Caldwell set down the papers and laced his fingers together. "Mr. Cole," he said, "how long has Gerald Holt been attempting to acquire your ranch property?" 6 years, Nathan said. "And you've contested how many claims in that period?" 3. Won all 3. This water rights matter is currently with Commissioner Alderson's office. 14 months, Nathan said. Unopened apparently for the first 6 weeks. Caldwell was quiet for a moment. "I want to be clear with both of you," he said carefully. "What you've brought me today is significant. The survey marker issue alone is actionable under federal statute. The Commissioner's office delay is something we would need to investigate independently. And the scale of what you're describing. If Holt has been systematically manipulating recorded documents across multiple properties." "He has," Evelyn said. "Then this is not a matter I can handle from this office alone. I would need to refer this to the Federal Marshal's office and contact the General Land Office in Washington." He paused. "That takes time." "How much time?" Evelyn asked. "Weeks, possibly longer." "In weeks," Nathan said, "he could file against more properties. He could complete purchases he hasn't finished yet." "I understand that," Caldwell said. What I can do right now, is issue a formal administrative hold on all property transactions in the affected area pending investigation. Nothing new gets filed, nothing gets recorded until the hold is cleared." He looked at Evelyn. "That stops the bleeding. It doesn't cure the wound." "But it stops him from acquiring anything else while the investigation moves," Evelyn said. "Yes." "Do it," Nathan said. Caldwell nodded and reached for his pen. And Evelyn felt watching that pen move across the official form the first concrete thing, shift in their favor, small legal procedural, and absolutely real. They were back on the street an hour later, with a receipt for the document copies Caldwell had retained, and a written confirmation of the administrative hold. Evelyn held the confirmation paper in both hands and read it twice. Then Nathan said, "He's going to find out." "Yes," she said. "When he does, his first move will be against the ranch. He's been building toward this for 6 years. If he thinks the investigation is going to expose him, he won't just walk away. He'll push harder." "I know." "And he knows you're involved now. He'll know it was you who found the documents." "I know that too," Evelyn said. She folded the confirmation paper and put it inside her coat. "Mr. Cole," she said, "what did he do when you won the North Pasture case and when you beat the first boundary challenge?" Nathan thought for a moment. Went quiet for a few months, then came back with the next thing. "He retreats and regroups," Evelyn said. "He doesn't abandon a strategy, he finds a new angle of attack. Which means the question isn't whether he retaliates. It's when and how, and whether we've built enough of a legal foundation that it doesn't matter." "The administrative hold buys us time," Nathan said. "And the federal referral, if Caldwell actually makes it, puts this above the level where Alderson or anyone Holt has in his pocket locally can touch it." She paused. "But we need more documentation. What I have is enough to start the investigation. It's not enough to end it." "What do you need?" "The Miller family," she said. "If their 1882 sale involved the same fraudulent survey marker, and if we can locate them in Billings and get a sworn statement." "Rosa mentioned they went to Billings," Nathan said. Evelyn looked at him. "Rosa mentioned a lot of things," Nathan said. "She usually does. It's usually relevant." "Do you know where in Billings?" "No, but Billings isn't that large." They looked at each other for a moment. "We should probably stay another night," Evelyn said. "I'll ask Garrett's equivalent in Billings if there's a family named Miller who came from the Red Hollow area in 1882, Nathan said. "Feed stores remember homesteading families." "I'll go back to Caldwell and ask if there are any other land office complaints on file from that area that might be connected." "Splitting up," Nathan said. "We cover more ground," Evelyn said. "And one of us can move without Holt's people noticing as easily as 2 together." He hesitated, just briefly. 3 hours, he said. We meet back here at 5 o'clock. 3 hours, she agreed. He started to move and then stopped. Evelyn. The name again in that particular register. If anyone asks you questions about what you're doing here, anyone you don't know. I was visiting a school administrator, she said. I'm a traveling teacher looking for a placement. Something moved in his expression. You've thought about this. I've been thinking about it since Red Hollow, she said. Go find the Millers. The land office records held 2 additional complaints from the affected area, both filed and both marked administratively resolved by Commissioner Alderson's office, with no further detail. One was from a family named Cabot, the other from a widow named Szymanski, whose husband had died the previous winter. Evelyn copied the case numbers and the dates and put them in her pocket. She was walking back down the main street toward the meeting point when someone said her name. Not Miss Harper. Not ma'am. Her name, her first name spoken with the particular familiarity of someone who knew her in a voice she recognized immediately. She turned. It was Thomas Voss, one of the 6 town council members who had filed past her in the Red Hollow hallway without stopping. A heavy-set man in his 40s with a prosperous merchant's coat and eyes that had gone in the 3 seconds since he'd seen her from recognition to something she could only describe as guilty calculation. Evelyn, he said again, now approaching, because he'd committed to having said it and couldn't walk back. I didn't expect to. What are you doing in Billings? Mr. Voss, she said. Her voice was entirely steady. Are you in town for business? Quarterly supply order, he said. He was looking at her with the particular discomfort of a man who had done something he knew was wrong and was now face to face with the consequence of it. Listen. About what happened in Red Hollow. The council didn't have much choice. You have to understand. I understand exactly what choices the council made and why, Evelyn said pleasantly. Thomas Voss's jaw tightened. Holt had already made up his mind. There was nothing any of us could. Tell me something, Mr. Voss, Evelyn said, and her voice dropped just slightly, just enough to make him pay closer attention. Do you own land in Red Hollow, a commercial lot, if I remember correctly, on the northern edge of the main street? He blinked. Yes. Why? And your deed, have you looked at it recently, compared it to the original township plat? The guilty calculation in his eyes shifted into something different, something uncertain. What are you talking about? He said. I'm talking about a man who has been systematically manipulating property records in the Red Hollow area for 3 years, Evelyn said. Not just homesteaders and widows' claims. Anyone whose land sits in a corridor that serves a particular purpose. Thomas Voss had gone slightly pale. The northern edge of the main street, Evelyn said carefully, sits directly on the proposed route of the Great Northern Railway's northern spur. Did you know that? That's just there's been talk but no official. Mr. Voss. She let the pleasantness drop. Just slightly. Just enough. Gerald Holt used the council to remove me because I was getting close to his scheme. You were part of that, whether you intended to be or not. I am not in the business of punishing men for being afraid. But I am going to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. He was staring at her. Has Holt approached you about your commercial property? She said. In the last 6 months, a purchase offer, maybe framed as a favor, a good price while the getting was good. Thomas Voss's face answered before his mouth did. 3 months ago, he said slowly. He offered me. It was a fair price, I thought. Did you sell? Not yet. I told him I'd think about it. Don't, Evelyn said. Do not complete that sale, and if you have a copy of your original deed, get it out and look at it before you sign anything. Voss was quiet for a long moment. Something was moving behind his eyes, the slow, uncomfortable rearrangement of a man who was realizing that the position he'd put himself in had been more deliberately constructed than he'd understood. What have you found? He said quietly. Evelyn looked at him. She had 4 hours ago told herself this man deserved nothing from her. That the 6 council members who had walked past her in that hallway had forfeited any claim on her effort or her consideration. But Thomas Voss was standing in front of her on this street, pale and uncertain, and the scheme she was dismantling was not going to fall apart through her moral satisfaction. It was going to fall apart through information, through witnesses, through people who had been peripheral to Holt's operation, deciding that the safer side had changed. "Come to the Federal Land Office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, she said. "Ask for Supervising Agent Caldwell. Tell him you have information about Gerald Holt's property dealings in Red Hollow and that Evelyn Harper sent you." Voss swallowed. "And if Holt finds out?" "He's going to find out about the investigation regardless," Evelyn said. "The question you need to answer tonight is whether you want to be on the right side of it when he does." She left him on the street and walked away and did not look back, and the whole of her was steady and purposeful and moving forward. Nathan was at the meeting point at 5 o'clock with a different quality in his face. The focused, contained energy of a man who had found what he was looking for. "The Millers," he said before she could speak. "They're here, west side of town, running a small boarding house. I talked to the husband. And he sold because a county surveyor came out and told him his eastern boundary was wrong by 65 yards, and that the resulting title dispute could take years to resolve. He didn't have years, he had a sick wife and 3 children. So he sold." Nathan's jaw was tight. He said the surveyor was a young man, very official, who said his name was Pruitt and that he'd been sent by the county assessor's office. "Pruitt," Evelyn said. "I've never heard that name in connection with Red Hollow's county office," Nathan said. "Have you?" "No," she said. "Which means Holt sent his own man. Someone dressed as an official county surveyor to deliver fraudulent survey results and pressure people into selling." "Miller still has the written report the surveyor left," Nathan said. "He never threw it out. He's not sure why something told him to keep it. Because people know when something feels wrong, even when they can't prove it," Evelyn said. "Does he still have his original deed?" "Framed on the wall of their sitting room," Nathan said. "His wife's father filed that claim in 1871. Miller would no sooner throw it out than burn the family Bible." "We need a sworn statement from him," Evelyn said. "And that surveyor's report. And we need to get both to Caldwell." "I already asked," Nathan said. "He'll come to the land office tomorrow morning." Evelyn looked at him. "I also found something else," Nathan said, and his voice dropped just slightly. "Miller mentioned that the young surveyor, this Pruitt, spent 2 nights in Red Hollow before he came out to the Miller property, and that during those 2 nights he was seen having dinner at the hotel with 2 men. Miller knew one of them." He paused. "Tell me," she said. "Commissioner Alderson," Nathan said. The word landed between them with the weight of everything it confirmed. Evelyn breathed in slowly. "He's been there in person," she said. "Alderson came to Red Hollow personally. He met with Holt's surveyor. Then the surveyor went to the Miller property. Then the Millers sold. Then Alderson's office spent 14 months sitting on your water rights case. It's not just that Holt has influence over Alderson," Nathan said quietly. "It's that Alderson is an active participant." "That changes the federal dimension significantly," Evelyn said. "A corrupt territorial official who is a federal appointee personally involved in survey fraud and property manipulation." "That's not a land dispute anymore," Nathan said. "No," she said. "That's a federal criminal conspiracy." She said it quietly, matter-of-factly, the way you state a thing you have just confirmed beyond the possibility of doubt. Nathan Cole looked at her for a long moment. Around them, the afternoon life of Billings moved on wagons and traffic, and the distant sound of someone arguing over a price at a stall. Ordinary, continuous, indifferent to the fact that 2 people standing on the boardwalk had just pulled a thread that was connected to something much larger and much darker than a rancher's property dispute. "Caldwell needs to know about Alderson tonight," Evelyn said. "Not tomorrow, tonight." "He'll still be in his office," Nathan said. "Then let's go." She was already moving. Nathan fell into step beside her, not half a length ahead this time. Beside her. Equal. Neither of them said anything about it. There wasn't time. And some things she was starting to understand didn't need to be said to be true. Caldwell took the Alderson information with the particular stillness of a man who had suspected something and had just been handed the confirmation. He said very little while they laid it out. He asked 3 precise questions. Then he picked up his pen again. I'll contact the U.S. Marshal's office tonight, he said. Not tomorrow, tonight. What does that mean practically? Nathan asked. It means this goes above territorial jurisdiction immediately, Caldwell said. Alderson cannot be warned or stalled by anyone in his own office if the referral comes directly from mine to the federal marshal. He looked at Evelyn. You understand that once this referral is made, the investigation will take its own course. It may be months before any formal action is visible. I understand, Evelyn said, and Holt will almost certainly become aware that something is moving against him before any formal charges are brought. He has contacts. He has resources. I know, Evelyn said. He may attempt to interfere with the investigation. He may move additional assets. He may come after the ranch directly, Nathan said flatly. I know, we'll deal with that. Caldwell looked at both of them for a moment. The rancher who had fought one fraudulent claim after another for 3 years, and the schoolteacher who had been pushed off a mountain road with $12 and a lame horse, and something in his expression shifted. Not quite respect. Something more precise than respect. Recognition of a particular kind of stubbornness that he had probably seen in this office before, the stubbornness of people who had been wronged and had decided quietly and completely and without drama that they were not going to stop. I'll need you both available for statements, he said. If the marshal sends investigators to the territory, they'll want to speak with you. We'll be at Cole Ranch, Nathan said. And, Caldwell said, carefully looking at Evelyn. Miss Harper, if you have any additional documents, any other records, any further evidence you locate in the coming weeks, send them directly to my office, not through any local or territorial channel. I understand, she said. I'll send everything through you. He nodded. Then go home, he said. Both of you. Let me do my part. The ride back was different from the ride out. Not because of what had changed externally, the same road, the same horses, the same Montana distances rolling out in every direction. But something in the air between them had shifted in the way that things shift when two people have gone through something together and come out the other side of it still standing. They were half a day's ride from the ranch when Nathan said without preamble, I want you to understand something. Evelyn looked at him. When you're ready to leave, when this is resolved, when you want to go somewhere else, find another position. I'm not going to ask you to stay, he said. I want to be clear about that. You came here because you needed somewhere to land. That's not a debt. It doesn't obligate you to anything. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. And if I want to stay, she said. Nathan looked straight ahead. Then that would be a different conversation, he said. What kind of conversation? An honest one, he said. About what this is and what it isn't and what it might be if... He stopped. The muscle in his jaw moved. I'm not a man who says things I don't mean. And I'm not a man who says things before I'm certain I mean them. So I'm not going to say anything yet. Evelyn looked at the road ahead. That's either very honest or very frustrating, she said. Probably both, he said. She felt the thing in her chest again. That small, warm, dangerous thing she had pressed flat 2 nights ago beside a wood stove with documents across her knees. She didn't press it flat this time. She let it exist. Just quietly. Just for a moment. Then she looked at the road and thought about the ranch records and the additional cross-referencing she needed to do, and the sworn statement from Miller that would need to be organized before it went to Caldwell, and the children's reading lesson she had promised for Thursday morning. And underneath all of that, steadily, and without demanding anything, that small, warm thing kept existing. She rode on. They rode into the ranch yard just before noon on the 3rd day, and Evelyn knew something was wrong before she cleared the gate. Not from anything dramatic. Not from visible damage or obvious confrontation. She knew it the way she had learned to know things in 7 years of living in a place where trouble announced itself quietly before it arrived loudly, from the way Hector was standing near the barn door, with his arms crossed and his weight forward, the posture of a man who had been waiting and was not happy about what he'd been waiting for. Nathan saw it at the same moment she did. He pulled up his horse without a word. Hector came towards them directly. 2 men came yesterday, he said. Said they were county assessors. Said they needed to inspect the water access points on the North Creek for the commissioner's ongoing review. Nathan's jaw went tight. You let them on the property. I told them they needed written authorization from you, Hector said. They said they didn't need the owner's permission for an official county assessment. He paused. I told them they did on this property, and that if they came past the gate without it, I'd be happy to discuss the matter further with them and my rifle. Nathan said nothing for a moment. They left, Hector said. But they sat on the road for 2 hours before they did. Watching the property, Evelyn said. Watching the property, Hector confirmed. He looked at her steadily. Rosa told the children to stay inside, just in case. Evelyn swung down from her horse and handed the reins to the young ranch hand who'd appeared from the stable. Her mind was already moving through the implications with the quick, methodical efficiency that had become her default mode over the past 3 days. He knows, she said to Nathan as Hector led the horses away. Not about Caldwell necessarily, but about Billings, or about us leaving. He had someone watching the road. I assumed he would, Nathan said. He was down from his horse, standing beside her, and his voice had gone to that flat measured register that she now understood meant he was managing something he felt strongly by keeping it very controlled. The question is, what he does next. He can't file anything new, Evelyn said. The administrative hold covers any new transactions in the affected area. He can't move land. But he can move people, Nathan said. They looked at each other. Rosa, Evelyn said immediately. They went inside. Rosa was at the kitchen table, which was unusual. Rosa was never at the kitchen table in the middle of the day, unless something had pulled her off her feet. She was sitting with a piece of paper in front of her, and her hands folded on top of it, and when Evelyn and Nathan came through the door, she looked up with an expression that had been carefully arranged into something calmer than it actually was. Someone left this at the front gate this morning, she said, tucked under a stone. Hector found it when he went out to check the fence line. Nathan took the paper. Evelyn read it over his arm. It was not signed. It was printed in careful, impersonal block letters, the handwriting of someone who understood that handwriting could be identified. The woman you are sheltering has made serious enemies. Continuing to harbor her will be considered an act of obstruction in ongoing county and territorial proceedings. Those who obstruct legitimate legal process face consequences. Consider carefully. Nathan set it down on the table. The kitchen was very quiet. Obstruction of legitimate legal process, Evelyn said, and she heard the flatness in her own voice. Not anger, not fear. The particular sound of a person who has gone past both into something colder and more useful. He's claiming that what we did in Billings constitutes obstruction. He's not claiming it legally, Nathan said. There's no case he can file. This is a warning. He wants us to think he has legal grounds he doesn't have. He wants you to ask me to leave, Evelyn said. Nathan looked at her. He's doing what he did in Red Hollow, she said. He couldn't come after me directly there. I hadn't done anything he could turn into a legal instrument. So he manufactured social pressure and community fear until the environment itself pushed me out. He's trying to do the same thing here. If he can convince you that keeping me here is risky enough. He can't, Nathan said. The 2 words were quiet and absolute, and Rosa, who had been watching the exchange from the table with her particular brand of focused attention, unclenched her hands slightly. He sent 2 men who called themselves county assessors, Nathan continued. He sent an anonymous threatening note. He's moved from filing fraudulent legal claims to making direct intimidation attempts. He picked up the paper and looked at it again. That's what happens when someone panics. Or when someone is moving to a different phase, Evelyn said. If he can't win through legal manipulation because of the hold and the federal referral, the next option is to apply enough direct pressure that the witnesses and the evidence become inaccessible before the federal investigation gets moving. The Millers, Nathan said immediately, and Thomas Voss if he went to Caldwell this morning like I asked him to, Evelyn said. And whatever other people in Red Hollow might be thinking about coming forward now that they know someone else has already moved. Hector, Nathan called. Hector appeared in the doorway almost immediately, with the quiet efficiency of a man who had been listening from close enough to know he'd be needed. I need you to send word to the Miller family in Billings, Nathan said. Tell them to be careful about who they talk to and to go to the federal land office if anyone approaches them about their statement. Use the Thompson boy, he's fast and he keeps his mouth shut. And to the land office directly, Evelyn said. Caldwell needs to know about these two men and this note today. If Holt is attempting witness intimidation before a federal investigation formally begins, that is itself a federal matter. I'll write it, Nathan said. Hector, have the Thompson boy ready to ride in 20 minutes. Hector nodded and was gone. Rosa stood up from the table and went back to the stove with the decisive movement of a woman who processed crisis through productivity. Within 30 seconds, she had a pot on the fire and the particular focused energy of someone choosing action over anxiety. Evelyn sat down at the table and pulled the document case toward her. She needed to think, and the way she thought was through paper, through organizing what she knew against what she could document against what remained to be proven. Nathan sat down across from her, and for a moment they simply worked in the same space, his letter taking shape in his steady, plain handwriting while she laid out the new implications in her mind. It was Nathan who spoke first without looking up from the letter. When you were in Red Hollow, he said, before it ended, did you have anyone? Anyone who stood beside you when it started getting difficult? Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Pruitt knew I was innocent, she said. She gave me $3 and whispered it to my back as I left. Nathan's pen stopped moving. That's not standing beside someone, he said. No, Evelyn agreed. It isn't. A pause. That's not going to happen here, he said. He said it simply without drama, the way he said everything that was true. Then he went back to the letter. Evelyn looked down at the documents in front of her and felt that small, warm thing move in her chest again, and this time she let it sit there fully and didn't manage it or minimize it or remind herself of all the practical reasons it was premature. She had been alone for 7 years. She was not alone now. That was real. Whatever else was uncertain, that was real. The letter went out with the Thompson boy that afternoon. By evening, 2 more things had happened that changed the shape of the situation in ways Evelyn hadn't anticipated. The first was that Thomas Voss arrived at the ranch. Not a letter, not a message. Thomas Voss himself on a hired horse with a travel bag arriving at the Cole Ranch gate at 4 in the afternoon, with the look of a man who had made a decision and was not entirely comfortable with it, and was going to follow through on it regardless. Nathan brought him in. Rosa gave him coffee with the expression of a woman reserving judgment. Evelyn sat across from him at the kitchen table and waited. I went to Caldwell this morning, Voss said, like you told me to. I know, Evelyn said. What happened? He took my statement. He took copies of my commercial deed and the purchase offer. Holt made me 3 months ago. Voss wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. And then he told me quietly, carefully, between just the 2 of us, that it would be advisable for me not to return to Red Hollow for the next several weeks. Evelyn sat very still. He said that, Nathan said. Not in those exact words, Voss said. He said the investigation was at a sensitive stage and that individuals who had provided cooperative statements should exercise caution about their daily movements. He paused. I'm not a brave man, Miss Harper. You know that. You saw it in that hallway. I know, Evelyn said, but I'm also not a stupid man. He looked at her with the complicated, ashamed directness of someone who has taken too long to do the right thing and knows it. I had already figured out since you spoke to me yesterday that Holt had used the council to get rid of you before you could find what you found. And that meant that whatever he said about you, about the Kendall boy, about the records about you being untrustworthy, he made all of that up. Not because it was true, because you were getting close. Yes, Evelyn said. We should have protected you, he said quietly. The council should have, I should have. He stopped. His jaw worked. I'm sorry, Evelyn. That doesn't fix anything, but I am. The kitchen was quiet. Evelyn looked at Thomas Voss. This man who had filed past her in a hallway 4 days ago and hadn't stopped. Who had been afraid and small and complicit in the way that frightened people are complicit, and she let herself feel the anger. She let it exist for a full breath. Then she set it aside. Not because he deserved forgiveness exactly, Because she needed witnesses more than she needed satisfaction, and those were not always compatible. "You can stay here tonight," she said. "Nathan has the room." Nathan, who had been leaning against the kitchen wall, nodded once. "Thank you," Voss said. He sounded genuinely surprised, as though he had expected something harder. The second thing that happened that evening was that Hector came in from the north fence line with news that moved everything to a different level. "Someone cut the fence," he said. "North pasture. About a quarter-mile of wire clean-cut, not broken. Tools, not accident." Nathan was on his feet before Hector finished the sentence. "Cattle," he said. 17 head drifted through before we found it. We've got them back. Nothing lost." Hector's face was tight. "But Nathan, there was a man watching from the ridge when I was doing the repair. I could see him clearly. He didn't try to hide." "He wanted to be seen," Evelyn said from the table. Both men looked at her. "He's showing Nathan what he can do," she said. "Cutting the fence isn't about the cattle. It's about demonstrating access, demonstrating willingness, showing Nathan that he can reach inside this property whenever he chooses." She paused. "It's escalation. After the note didn't work, he escalates." "He escalates," Nathan said carefully, "and I respond by not responding the way he wants you to," Evelyn said. "He wants a confrontation he can use. He wants you angry and reactive and making moves he can document as threatening. Don't give him that." "So I ignore my fence being cut," Nathan said, and the controlled flatness in his voice had gone a degree tighter. "You repair your fence," Evelyn said. "You document the damage with a written record of the date, time, and extent. You have Hector and the ranch hands sign the record as witnesses. You send a copy to Caldwell's office tonight, along with a note identifying it as potential witness intimidation, connected to the active federal referral." Nathan looked at her for a long moment. "You turn every move he makes into evidence," he said. "Every move he makes is evidence," she said. "He just hasn't realized yet that the frame has shifted. He's still operating like this is a property dispute between a businessman and a rancher where the rules favor whoever has more money and more connections. He hasn't understood yet that the frame is now a federal criminal investigation where every intimidation attempt and every piece of evidence of obstruction makes the case against him stronger." The kitchen was very quiet for a moment. Then Rosa said from the stove without turning around, "She's right." Nathan exhaled. "Hector," he said, "get the record book. We document the fence tonight." 3 days passed in a state of controlled tension that Evelyn found paradoxically easier to manage than the uncertainty of Red Hollow had been. At least here she knew what she was managing. At least here the shape of the threat was visible. She taught the children every morning, not just reading and arithmetic, but the kind of careful, methodical thinking that she had always believed was the real purpose of education. How to look at a document and understand what it claimed versus what it proved. How to ask a question that went one level deeper than the obvious question. How to decide who to trust, not by how confident they sounded, but by whether their account matched the observable facts. She was aware that she was also teaching herself in some sense, reminding herself in the act of teaching of everything she believed about what knowledge was for. The children were wonderful, or 2 of them were, and the third was a boy named Cisco, who was 8 years old and constitutionally opposed to sitting still, who she eventually gave up trying to confine to a chair, and instead put in charge of organizing the document copies by date, which kept his hands busy and turned out to produce better organizational results than Whitmore had managed in his last year. Nathan came to the doorway of the teaching room on the 3rd morning and watched for a few minutes without saying anything. She was aware of him standing there. She was always aware when Nathan Cole entered a room had been since the first morning in his kitchen, and she had stopped pretending otherwise, but she didn't stop teaching until the natural end of the lesson, when she released the children for their midday break. When she turned, he was still there. "Caldwell wrote," he said, and held up a letter. Evelyn crossed the room and took it. The letter was formally worded and deliberately general in its language, which she understood was intentional letters could be intercepted. What it communicated beneath the official phrasing was significant. The U.S. Marshal's office in Helena had received the referral. 2 federal investigators were being dispatched to the territory within the next 2 weeks. They would be contacting Nathan directly for a formal interview and requesting all original documents. And at the bottom, in different handwriting, a single added line that Caldwell had apparently written after the main letter was composed. Your friend from Red Hollow came in again this morning. He brought a second council member with him. Progress. Evelyn looked up from the letter. Voss brought someone else from the council, she said. 2 of the 6, Nathan said. That's not nothing. No, she said. That's not nothing. She read the letter again. 2 weeks for the federal investigators. We need the fence documentation and the note and the assessor incident, all properly organized and ready for them. It's ready, Nathan said. I've been keeping the record. She looked at him. You've been keeping the record on your own, she said. You taught me how, he said simply. Date, time, witness signatures, physical description. You told me every move he makes is evidence. A pause. I took notes. Evelyn felt something move through her that was not the small warm thing from before, or rather it was that, but larger, now fuller, less cautious. The feeling of a person who has spent a long time being the only one paying careful attention and has suddenly realized that someone else has been paying equally careful attention to different things, and that together the 2 perspectives cover the entire field. She folded the letter. We need to talk about after, she said. Nathan was very still. After the investigators come, she said carefully. After the case is built and filed and whatever legal process follows takes its course. Months, maybe. Caldwell was honest about that. In the meantime, she paused. I've been here 2 weeks. I came for 2 days while Grayson's leg healed. I remember, Nathan said. The children need consistent teaching. The records need ongoing management. The evidence needs to be organized and updated as the investigation develops. She was being deliberate, precise, keeping this on the practical level, because the practical level was where she felt most sure of herself. I'm not proposing to stay indefinitely out of, I'm not saying... She stopped. Nathan waited. I'm bad at this, she said. At what? He said. He wasn't making it easier for her, but his eyes were. There was something in his eyes that was making it harder in an entirely different way. At saying things that aren't about work, she said. I know, he said. I'm not much better. A pause. I want to stay, she said. Not because of the investigation, not because of the records, not because of the children, though I love teaching them. She met his eyes directly because she was not a woman who looked away from things that mattered. Because of this. Because of the last 2 weeks. Because you rode to Billings beside me, and you kept the evidence record while I was teaching, and you didn't ask me to be less than I am, and you didn't ask me to leave when the note arrived. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Evelyn, he said. You told me it would be a different conversation, she said. You told me when you were certain. Are you certain? He crossed the room in 3 steps and stood in front of her close enough that she had to tilt her head slightly to hold his gaze close enough that she could see the exact quality of what was in his face, which was not complicated at all. It was simple. It was the uncomplicated simplicity of a man who had been lonely for a long time and had found something worth not being lonely about and was not going to be careless with it. I've been certain since you told Garrett's clerk you'd come for 2 days while your horse rested, he said, and then spent the entire night going through my record boxes. Evelyn felt the laugh come up before she expected it, a real one, sudden and genuine, the kind she hadn't felt in months. That was the first night, she said. I know, he said. And now he smiled, the real one, the full one that she'd seen only briefly before. I'm a fast learner when the subject matters. She looked at him for a moment. Then she put her hand against his chest. Not a dramatic gesture, just a simple, deliberate, honest placement of her hand against the place where she could feel his heart beating, and said, Then yes, I'm staying. His hand covered hers. Neither of them moved for a moment. Just that. Just the warmth of it. Just the plain, unhurried reality of 2 people who had found each other in the middle of a fight and had decided without ceremony that the finding mattered. Rosa appeared in the doorway. She looked at them. She looked at their hands. She looked back at their faces. Then she turned around and walked back to the kitchen, and from down the hall, they heard her say to no one in particular, "Finally." The following week arrived with two events that changed the timeline of everything. The first was a letter from Margaret Larson in Billings, forwarded through Caldwell's office. It was short and written in the careful, tight handwriting of a woman who chose her words deliberately. "Miss Harper, I did not go to the territorial office as you advised because I was afraid. I have been afraid ever since I signed the sale documents, and I have not known why until your name reached me through Mr. Miller. I still have the originals of everything. I kept them because my husband said, always keep the originals. He was a careful man. If they are useful, they are yours. I am sorry I did not act sooner. Please tell the man in the federal office that I will say whatever I saw to whoever needs to hear it. Margaret Larson." Evelyn read the letter twice and then handed it to Nathan. He read it once. "She kept the originals," he said. "Her husband told her to keep the originals," Evelyn said. "God bless careful men," Nathan said quietly. "The originals with a fraudulent station .7 notation, coming from a woman willing to make a sworn statement, matched against the Cole counter survey and the documents we've already submitted." Evelyn stopped. "Nathan, that's the chain. That's the complete documentary chain." "Send it to Caldwell today," Nathan said immediately. "I'll write the cover letter now," she said. She was already at the table. The second event arrived not as a letter, but as a person, which was how the most significant things always arrived. She came on a Thursday afternoon, a woman Evelyn didn't recognize traveling alone on a good horse with a territorial government seal on her saddlebag, who asked for Nathan Cole by full name at the gate, and identified herself when Hector brought her to the house as Deputy Federal Investigator Clara Marsh of the U.S. Marshal's Office in Helena. She was perhaps 40 years old, composed and sharp-eyed with the manner of someone who had been doing her job long enough to be very good at it, and was not particularly interested in impressing anyone. "Mr. Cole," she said. "Miss Harper." Evelyn went still. "You know who I am. Your name appears 14 times in the referral documents Caldwell sent to our office," Marsh said. "You're the one who found the survey marker discrepancy." "Yes," Evelyn said. "Good," Marsh said simply. "I have questions." She sat at the kitchen table. Rosa produced coffee without being asked, and for the next 2 hours she asked questions with the systematic, unhurried thoroughness of someone building a structure that would need to hold weight in a federal courtroom. She didn't lead. She didn't suggest. She let each of them speak, and she wrote what they said, and she asked the next question. When she was done with Evelyn's account, she looked up. "Commissioner Alderson was removed from his position 4 days ago," she said. The kitchen went completely silent. "Removed," Nathan said. "Pending investigation," Marsh said. "The hold on your water rights case has been transferred to the acting commissioner, who has already cleared it for resolution in your favor." She looked at Nathan steadily. "Your water rights are restored, Mr. Cole. Formally. Effective as of this morning." Nathan sat back in his chair. He said nothing for a moment. Evelyn watched his face absorb it. 3 years of fighting one manufactured claim after another, and the core issue. The one at the center of all of it resolved in a sentence by a woman at his kitchen table. "And Holt," Evelyn said. "Active federal investigation," Marsh said. "I'm not at liberty to discuss details. What I can tell you is that the survey fraud chain you documented is central to the case. The U.S. Attorney's Office is involved." She paused. "It will take time. These things always take time. But the foundation you've built here." She tapped the document folder in front of her. "This doesn't fall apart. This is the kind of evidence that holds." Evelyn breathed. Not a dramatic breath. Just a quiet, full one. The kind that happens when something you have been carrying at tension finally permits itself to release by a single degree. "What do we need to do?" Nathan asked. "Stay available," Marsh said. "Keep your records organized the way they are. Don't discuss the case with anyone you haven't already spoken to in connection with this investigation." She stood up, picked up her folder. "And live your lives. The investigation will do what investigations do." She looked at Evelyn. "You're not in Red Hollow anymore, Miss Harper. You don't have to fight this alone." After Marsh left, Hector and the ranch hands drifted in one at a time, reading the quality of the silence in the house, the way people who live close to the land read weather. Rosa told them in a few plain sentences what had happened. There was no celebration. It was too early for celebration, and they all knew it, but something settled in the room. Something that had been held at readiness for a very long time allowed itself briefly and carefully to rest. Nathan came to stand beside Evelyn on the porch. "It's not over," he said. "No," she said. "But it's moving in the right direction." He was quiet for a moment. "Evelyn," he said, "I want to ask you something." She looked at him. "When this is over—" He stopped, started again more carefully in the way of a man who had decided to say something true and wanted to get the words right. "When the investigation is done, and the court does whatever it does, and the land is sorted, and the children have learned everything you have to teach them." He stopped again. "Nathan," she said. "I'm trying to say this properly," he said. "You don't have to say it properly," she said. "You just have to say it." He turned to look at her fully. "Stay," he said. "Not because the work needs doing. Not because the records need managing. Stay because this is yours as much as it's mine, and because I don't want to go back to how it was before you came down that mountain road with a lame horse and $12. He held her gaze. "I have never said that to anyone in my life. I mean every word of it." Evelyn Harper stood on the porch of a ranch that was not yet fully safe and not yet fully won, with a federal investigation moving slowly through channels she couldn't control, and a man she had known for 2 weeks who had just said the truest thing anyone had said to her in years. She thought about the boarding house room she had left, the 11-word letter, the hallway of men who wouldn't stop. She thought about Mrs. Pruitt's $3 tucked against her chest. She thought about what it meant to build something, not a life someone gave you. Not a position you were permitted to hold, but something you chose and fought for and stayed for because it was worth staying for. "I'm already staying," she said. "I told you that." "I know," he said. "I just wanted to ask." She put her hand in his deliberately, as she did everything, and they stood on that porch together while the afternoon light moved across the valley and the ranch settled around them like something that had always known they were coming. 6 weeks after Deputy Marshal Marsh rode away from the coal ranch with a folder full of evidence and a promise that investigations take time. Evelyn learned that time was not the only thing they took. They also took patience. They took the daily discipline of continuing to live while something enormous moved slowly through institutions you couldn't see or touch or hurry. They took the particular kind of courage that wasn't dramatic, not the courage of riding to Billings in 3 days with a document case, not the courage of standing in front of a federal agent and laying out a criminal scheme in methodical detail, but the quieter, harder courage of waking up every morning and teaching children their letters and organizing land records and cooking supper with Rosa and not letting the waiting hollow you out. Evelyn was better at that kind of courage than she had expected to be. What helped was the work. The children were advancing faster than she'd dared to hope. Cisco, the 8-year-old who couldn't sit still, had turned out to have a remarkable memory and had begun reading independently, which he treated as a personal achievement, roughly equivalent to breaking a wild horse. The older children were working on composition and basic arithmetic, and one of them, a quiet girl named Ada, Hector's eldest, had a mind for numbers that made Evelyn's chest tighten, with the particular emotion of a teacher who recognizes something exceptional and understands the responsibility that comes with it. She told Ada this directly, which was not how most people spoke to frontier children about their abilities, and Ada had looked at her with the startled expression of someone who had never been told the truth about themselves before. "You're going to do something remarkable with that mind," Evelyn told her. "I don't know what yet, but I want you to know it." Ada said nothing for a moment. Then, "My father says girls don't need numbers." "Your father," Evelyn said carefully, "is wrong about that specific thing while being right about most other things. You can hold both of those facts at the same time." Ada thought about it. Then she nodded with the solemn gravity of a child filing important information for permanent storage. Nathan came in from the morning ride and found Evelyn still at the teaching table 20 minutes after the children had been released. Not marking papers, but sitting with her hands flat on the table and her eyes somewhere past the wall. Ada, he said. He had learned to read the specific quality of her thinking silences. Ada, she confirmed. Nathan, if there were a proper school in this valley, not just me teaching in the ranch room, but a real schoolhouse with books and materials and a formal curriculum. There's land for it, he said, the flat quarter-mile east of the creek. She looked at him. I looked at it 3 weeks ago, he said without particular ceremony. I was going to mention it when the timing felt right. Evelyn pressed her lips together to manage what was happening in her expression. You looked at land for a schoolhouse 3 weeks ago, she said. You mentioned the children needed more space, he said. I pay attention. She looked at her hands on the table. We'll need to talk about funding, she said, because if she didn't redirect to something practical immediately, she was going to do something that would embarrass them both. We'll talk about funding. He agreed with the faint knowing movement at the corner of his mouth that she had come to understand was his version of being delighted about something. The letter from Caldwell's office arrived on a Tuesday morning in late September, and it was longer than previous correspondence, formal, dense, carefully worded, and Evelyn read it standing at the front door, where Hector had brought it to her, before her hands could quite decide whether to tremble. The federal investigation into Gerald Holt's land fraud scheme had resulted in a grand jury indictment on 9 counts. The counts included federal survey fraud, wire fraud, connected to the fraudulent property sales conspiracy, to obstruct a federal investigation, and bribery of a territorial commissioner. Former Commissioner Alderson had been indicted separately on 4 counts and had already indicated intent to cooperate with federal prosecutors. The administrative hold on all affected properties was being converted to a formal legal freeze pending resolution of the criminal case. And at the bottom, in Caldwell's own handwriting, a single additional line, Miss Harper. The survey fraud chain you identified is the spine of the federal case. 9 counts. None of this without your work. Caldwell. Evelyn read that line 3 times. Then she sat down on the front step of the ranch house because her legs had decided they needed a moment. Rosa appeared behind her within 60 seconds, which suggested she had been nearby and waiting. She sat down beside Evelyn without speaking and read the letter over her shoulder. 9 counts, Rosa said. 9, Evelyn said. A pause. Alderson is cooperating, Rosa said, which means he'll tell them everything he knows about how Holt operated, Evelyn said. Who he paid, who he threatened, how the surveyor network worked, how the recording office was being manipulated. The Miller family gets their land value acknowledged, Rosa said. In court at minimum. Whether they get financial restitution depends on the civil case that will probably follow the criminal one. Evelyn folded the letter carefully. Margaret Larson, too. And us, Rosa said quietly. Evelyn looked at her. This ranch, Rosa said. 12 years Nathan's fought for this land, and before that his father fought for it. She was looking straight ahead, and her voice had gone to a lower register, the one she used when something mattered enough that she stopped managing the distance around it. The first winter I was here, Gerald Holt came to the ranch personally. Nathan was out on the cattle drive. I was the only adult in the house. Holt sat at this table, that exact table, and told me the ranch would belong to him within 5 years, and that the smart thing would be for everyone working here to start making other arrangements. Evelyn went still. I didn't know that, she said. Nathan doesn't know it either, Rosa said. I never told him because he would have ridden into Red Hollow and done something that would have given Holt exactly what he needed. She paused. I made Holt his coffee, and I told him the table was Nathan's, and he was welcome to put whatever he believed in front of Nathan directly, and I showed him out. Evelyn looked at Rosa's profile, the strong jaw, the steady eyes, the face of a woman who had been quietly holding things together for 12 years while the storms came in from every direction. You've been fighting this as long as Nathan has, Evelyn said. I have a different way of fighting, Rosa said. But yes. Evelyn reached out and put her hand over Rosa's. Rosa looked down at it. Then she turned her hand over and gripped Evelyn's briefly, firmly, completely, and then released it and stood up and smoothed her apron. Nathan needs to see that letter, she said, and went back inside. Nathan read the letter standing in the kitchen, and he read it slowly, the way he read everything all the way through once before he responded to any part of it. When he looked up, his face was doing something Evelyn had not seen it do before. Not the contained, managed expression of a man handling a difficult situation. Something more open than that. Something that had dropped whatever it had been holding up and was just there. 9 counts, he said. 9, she said. He set the letter on the table. My father filed this claim in 1872, he said. He built the first structure on this land with 4 men and 1 mule, and a winter that nearly killed all of them. He held it until 1879, and then he handed it to me and told me some land is worth more than money. He paused. Holt made his first offer 3 months after my father died. Evelyn said nothing. She let him have the silence. I always thought, Nathan said slowly, that the fight was about the land, that if I could just hold the land, that was the thing. He looked at her. But the fight was never really about the land. It was about what Holt was willing to do to people to get what he wanted. The land was just the arena. And the people were the actual damage, Evelyn said. Yes, he said. The Millers, the Larsons, the Cabots, the woman named Szymanski whose husband died. She paused. Me. Yes, he said again. That's what the criminal case is actually about, she said. Not the survey markers, not the recording fees, the people. 9 counts because 9 separate harmful acts were committed against real people who had done nothing wrong and had their lives altered because one man wanted a railway corridor. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then, we should go to Red Hollow. Evelyn looked at him carefully. Why? Because Voss, and whoever else he brought in, they went to Caldwell. They did something that cost them something. And there are other people, their families, people who watched you leave who don't know yet what's happening. He held her gaze. And because you left that town with 11 words on a piece of paper and your head up, I think you deserve to ride back into it with something different. I don't need the town's approval, she said. I know you don't, he said. That's not what I'm offering. A pause. I'm offering to ride beside you when you do it, that's all. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. When, she said. When you're ready, he said. She thought about it. Saturday, she said. They rode into Red Hollow on a Saturday morning, with the early October sky wide and clean above them, and Evelyn was aware as the first buildings of the town came into view of the exact quality of what she was feeling. Not triumph, not anger. Something quieter and more complete than either the particular feeling of a person who has gone through something and come out the other side, changed in ways they're still discovering. Nathan rode beside her. Not half a length ahead. Beside her. She had not asked him to. He had simply positioned himself there as naturally as breathing, as though it had always been where he belonged. The first person to see them was a woman named June Calloway, who ran the dry goods store, and who stopped in the middle of sweeping her front boardwalk and held her broom still, and watched Evelyn ride past with an expression that moved through 3 emotions in quick succession. Recognition, discomfort, and then something that looked very much like relief. Evelyn nodded to her. June Calloway nodded back. It was not forgiveness. It was not even acknowledgement of what had happened. But it was something one person seeing another person and not looking away. And Evelyn filed it exactly where it belonged, which was as one small true thing in a situation full of complicated ones. Thomas Voss found them at the hotel, where they had arranged to meet him with another council member named Patterson, whose wife had apparently been the deciding factor in his decision to cooperate. She had told him, according to Voss, that she had been ashamed of him every day since the vote, and would continue to be ashamed until he did something about it. And Patterson, being apparently a man with more sense than courage, who had married a woman with both, had listened. They sat around a table in the hotel dining room, and Evelyn laid out clearly, and without embellishment, what the federal indictment meant for the people of Red Hollow. The survey fraud had affected not just the outlying homesteads, but potentially any property whose deed had been recorded through the county office during the period when Holt's influence was active. Everyone with land in the affected area should have their deeds checked against the original township plat. How? Patterson asked. I can help, Evelyn said. I know the records. I know what to look for. I can organize a systematic review if people are willing to bring their documents forward. Voss looked at her. You'd do that? After what the town? I'd do it for the same reason I taught here for 7 years, Evelyn said. Because the people who need it haven't done anything wrong, and because it's the right thing to do, and because I happen to be very good at it. A silence. The council should formally request it, Voss said, looking at Patterson. The council that ran me out of town, Evelyn said, does not need to formally request anything. I'm not interested in the council's endorsement. I'll sit in this hotel dining room for 2 days, and anyone who wants their deed checked can bring it to me. She paused. Can you get the word out by this afternoon? Yes, Voss said without hesitation. Then that's what we do, Evelyn said. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, 11 families had come to the hotel dining room. By the end of the first day, Evelyn had reviewed 23 deeds and identified 4 with anomalies connected to the fraudulent Station Point 7 notation, not as severe as the Larson case, but present documentable and significant enough that the affected families needed to be part of the federal civil proceedings. Nathan sat beside her for all of it, not doing the document work that was hers unambiguously but present. Steady. Pouring water and moving chairs and managing the flow of people with the quiet competence of a man who understood exactly what his role was and did not feel diminished by it. It was toward the end of the second day, when the dining room had finally emptied and Evelyn was organizing the final set of notes, that Martha Gaines came in. Clara's mother. The woman who had said it matters what people believe on the boardwalk, while Evelyn held the dismissal letter against her chest. She stood in the dining room doorway, and she looked older than she had 6 weeks ago, or maybe Evelyn was just seeing her more clearly. May I sit down? Martha asked. Yes, Evelyn said. Martha sat. She had a paper in her hands that she was folding and unfolding without appearing to notice she was doing it. She didn't say anything for a moment. Clara cried when you left, she said finally. She didn't understand why. I told her it was complicated, that adults sometimes had to make difficult decisions. She stopped. That was a lie. It wasn't complicated. I was a coward, and I let a coward's decision destroy something good. Evelyn looked at her steadily. Clara asked me last week if you were coming back, Martha said, and I didn't know what to say. What did you tell her? Evelyn said. I told her I hoped so, Martha said, and her voice broke on the last word, just slightly, just barely, but it broke, and she let it, and she didn't look away. I know that's not enough. I know sorry isn't enough. She paused. I wanted you to hear it from me directly, not because it fixes what happened, because you deserve to hear it from someone who should have said it 6 weeks ago. Evelyn sat with that for a long, real moment. She thought about Mrs. Pruitt and her $3. She thought about Martha Gaines in this same moment 6 weeks earlier, looking past her shoulder at the middle distance. She thought about what it cost to be afraid in a small town, controlled by a powerful man, and what it cost to stay afraid, and what it cost other people when you did. Tell Clara, Evelyn said, that Miss Harper sends her love, and that she should keep writing. She had the finest instinct for narrative of any student I've ever taught. Martha's eyes filled. That's it, she said. That's all you? That's what I have right now, Evelyn said honestly. It may be more later. I don't know yet. Some things take time. She paused. You were afraid. I've been afraid too. I'm not in the business of pretending that fear is simple. Martha nodded. She stood up. At the doorway she turned back. He's finished, isn't he? She said. Holt. Yes, Evelyn said. He's finished. Martha Gaines left without another word, and in the quiet she left behind, Nathan reached across the table and covered Evelyn's hand with his. She turned her hand over and held on. The federal trial of Gerald Holt began the following February in the territorial court in Helena, elevated to federal jurisdiction on the basis of the survey fraud charges. It lasted 11 days. Evelyn testified on the 3rd day and the 7th, and she sat in that courtroom and answered every question in the same methodical, steady voice she used to explain mathematics to 8-year-olds, and land deed anomalies to federal investigators. And she did not look at Gerald Holt while she spoke because he was not the point. The evidence was the point. The 9 counts were the point. The Millers and the Larsons and the Cabots and the widow Szymanski, who testified on the 6th day, with her hands folded in her lap and her chin level, were the point. Nathan sat behind her in the gallery for both of her testimony days, and she was aware of him there, the way she was always aware of him. Not as a comfort exactly, though it was that, but as something more precise. As the knowledge that someone was paying attention. That the room had a witness she trusted. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. Guilty on 7 of 9 counts. Gerald Holt was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to cooperate with the civil restitution proceedings that would determine what financial remedies were available to the defrauded property owners. Alderson received 4 years and had already begun his cooperation testimony before the criminal trial concluded. Evelyn heard the verdict standing in the Helena courthouse hallway, with Nathan beside her and Caldwell 20 feet away, speaking to the federal prosecutor, and what she felt was not the explosion of emotion she might have expected after months of work and waiting. It was something quieter. Something that moved through her slowly and thoroughly, like warmth through a body that has been cold for a long time. It was done. Not perfectly done. There were civil proceedings ahead, and restitution timelines, and the work of reviewing all the affected deeds would continue for months. But the criminal reckoning had happened. The man who had run her off a mountain road with $12 and a lame horse had been held to account in a federal courtroom in front of a jury of 12 people who had read the evidence she helped build and understood what it meant. "Evelyn," Nathan said. She turned to look at him. "I wasn't doing anything dramatic." He wasn't making a speech. He was just standing beside her in a courthouse hallway, looking at her with the open, uncomplicated expression that she had learned was what he looked like when he had decided there was nothing left to manage. "You did this," he said. "We did this," she said. "You found it," he said. "You put it together. You rode to Billings and sat in front of Caldwell and organized the documentation and testified twice in a federal courtroom." He paused. "I was beside you for most of it. That's not the same as doing it." "It's more than you know," she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and took out something small. A ring, plain gold, simple and solid, and clearly chosen by a man who did not ornament things that didn't need ornamenting, and he held it in his open palm between them. Not down on one knee. Not a dramatic gesture. Just Nathan Cole standing in a courthouse hallway, holding out something he meant. "I was going to wait until we were home," he said. "But I don't think I can." Evelyn looked at the ring in his hand. Then she looked at his face. "You picked this out before the trial," she said. "Before the trial," he confirmed. "Before you knew what the verdict would be." "The verdict didn't change anything about this," he said. "It never did." She looked at the ring again. She thought about a mountain road in a summer storm. A kitchen table with record boxes spread across the floor. A 3-day ride to Billings with the documents she'd found by candlelight. A child named Ada, who had a mind for numbers. A schoolhouse on a flat quarter-mile east of a creek on land that was his and was becoming hers in every way that mattered. She thought about the 11-word letter she had stopped carrying like a wound and started carrying like evidence. She thought about Rosa sitting down beside her on a front step without being asked. She thought about Nathan Cole positioning his horse beside hers, instead of half a length ahead, so naturally, so completely, that it had taken her 2 days to realize he'd changed. She took the ring from his hand and held it for a moment, feeling its weight, which was exactly the weight it should be present, real, not too heavy, and not too light. Then she held out her left hand. He put it on her finger. Neither of them said anything for a moment, because some things don't need words to be complete. And Nathan Cole was a man who understood that better than most. Then Caldwell appeared at the end of the hallway, heading toward them, with his hand extended for Nathan's, and Evelyn straightened, and Nathan shook the man's hand, and the courthouse continued its ordinary business around them, as though the world had not just quietly arranged itself into exactly the shape it was always supposed to take. They rode home the next day, back through the same distances, the same Montana sky, the same roads she had traveled in both directions, now carrying very different things. She had the verdict in her memory, and the ring on her finger, and 4 months of accumulated evidence that had outlasted a man who thought removing her from his path would remove the problem she represented. She was the problem he had never understood. She was the teacher who noticed things, the woman who kept records, the person who understood that knowledge was not just comfort, it was power. And the right use of power was to stand between the people who had it and the people who needed it. Nathan rode beside her, and they talked about the schoolhouse, about the materials they'd need, about whether they could get proper books from Helena before winter, about Caldwell's suggestion that other families in the affected area might want to associate with the Cole Ranch community now that the fraud was exposed and the landhold was lifting. About Ada, and whether there was a way to give her a path to real education beyond what a frontier teaching room could provide. About what the ranch was becoming. Not just Nathan's cattle operation, not just Evelyn's teaching room, something larger and more deliberate, a place that took in the people the territory's harsher arithmetic tended to leave behind. It needs a name, Nathan said. The ranch already has a name, Evelyn said. The ranch is the Cole Ranch, he said. What we're building is something else, something that deserves its own name. Evelyn was quiet for a moment, watching the late afternoon light move across the valley as they descended from the last hill above the property. Harper Cole, she said. He looked at her. Both names, she said. Because it's both of us. And because I'm not in the habit of disappearing into someone else's story. A pause. Harper Cole, he repeated slowly, trying it. If it bothers you, she said, I'm open to. It doesn't bother me, he said. He said it simply without the faintest hesitation. Harper Cole it is. She looked at the valley below them. The ranch house. The barn where Grayson had recovered from his strained fetlock. The teaching room where Ada was probably reading independently right now because no one had told her she had to stop when the lesson ended. The flat quarter-mile east of the creek where a schoolhouse was going to stand by spring if Evelyn had anything to say about it, which she did, because she always did. Rosa was going to come out of the kitchen when they rode in, and she was going to see the ring, and she was going to say something that sounded tart and was actually the fullest expression of love she was capable of. And Evelyn was going to understand that and love her for it. Hector was going to shake Nathan's hand with both of his. Cisco was going to ask why everyone was making a fuss, and then announce that he had finished reading the entire first chapter of the reader book Evelyn had given him, which would be more important to Evelyn than almost anything else that had happened that day. And in the months ahead, the civil proceedings would move forward, and the defrauded families would receive what restitution the law could give them, which would not be everything, but would be something which was more than nothing, which was what Holt had intended to leave them. The schoolhouse would go up. Ada would be given books she hadn't known existed. More families would find their way to the valley, drawn by the particular reputation that places develop when they are genuinely what they claim to be. And Evelyn Harper, who had ridden away from Red Hollow in the summer of 1885 with a dismissal letter pressed against her chest, and $12 and a horse that couldn't carry her any further, would teach and build and work and stay. Not because she needed somewhere to be, but because she had found somewhere worth being. Not because a man had given her a life, because she had built one with her own hands on ground. She had chosen beside someone who understood that her strength was not something to be managed or softened or worked around. It was the whole point. It had always been the whole point. Nathan Cole looked over at her as they rode through the ranch gate, and she looked back at him, and between them passed the particular kind of understanding that doesn't require words. The understanding of two people who have been through something real together and have decided without ceremony or performance that they are not finished. That they are, in fact, just beginning. Evelyn Harper rode through that gate with her head up and her eyes clear and the ring on her finger catching the last light of the afternoon. And she was not running from anything, and she was not arriving at the end of something. She was home. She had made it herself. And no one, not Gerald Holt, not 11 words on a piece of paper. Not every neighbor who had looked past her shoulder at the comfortable middle distance had ever had the power to take that from her. Because the kind of home Evelyn Harper built was not made of land or timber or legal deeds. It was made of the one thing no fraud could survey, no corrupt commissioner could file away, and no frightened town could vote to remove. It was made of who she was, and who she was had never, not for a single day of her life, been anyone's to take.